We're surrounded by political labels all the time, right? But what do they actually mean? Well, today, we're going to demystify this whole idea of political ideology. We're going to unpack its core blueprint and see how it really shapes our entire world. I mean, think about it. We hear words like liberal and conservative thrown around constantly on the news, online, everywhere. But what are the actual building blocks behind them? What's going on at their very core? That's exactly what we're here to figure out. So let's go way back to the beginning. The term ideology wasn't dreamt up in some quiet library. No, it was actually forged in the fire of the French Revolution. See, you had this French thinker who wanted to create a science of ideas, to really understand these powerful belief systems that were literally toppling kings. Okay, so what is it really? A political ideology isn't just a random grab bag of opinions. It's a structured belief system that is built for one thing: action. And the keywords here are right there: preserve, modify, or overthrow. An ideology can be about protecting the way things are, maybe tweaking it around the edges, or just burning it all down and starting fresh. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Ideologies like socialism, conservatism, and even feminism, they seem worlds apart, right? But despite all their differences, they're all built from the exact same blueprint. Let's take a look at the shared internal structure they all have. Okay, so every single ideology basically follows a three-step process. First up, you have the critique. It asks, what's wrong with the world right now? Second, you get the vision. This is the part that asks, what would a perfect society actually look like? And third, you have the plan. How do we get from our broken present to that better future? Critique, vision, plan, every time. But hold on, here's a twist. The whole concept of ideology is actually super contested. Is it a noble search for the truth, or is it something a little more manipulative? This brings us to a major intellectual showdown between two really important thinkers, Karl Marx and Karl Mannheim. For Karl Marx, the answer was pretty simple, and maybe a little cynical. He basically argued that the dominant ideas you hear in any society are just the ideas of whoever's in charge. For him, ideology wasn't some grand search for what's right. It was a powerful weapon used by the elite to keep everyone else in line. And this is the crucial difference. For Marx, ideology is a delusion. It's a kind of false consciousness that basically blinds the working class. But for Mannheim, it's just a worldview, a thought system that naturally grows out of a group's social position. So one sees it as a lie, and the other sees it as a lens. It's a huge distinction. Now, of course, ideologies don't just sit still. They evolve over time. And in the last century or so, we've seen this really dramatic shift in what politics is even about, moving from a big battle over economics to a big battle over culture. For hundreds of years, the big ideologies were all wrestling with economic questions. Who gets the money? Who owns the property? How big should the government be? But then, starting around the 1960s, the whole conversation started to change. New ideologies popped up that were way less about what's in your wallet and a lot more about your identity, your personal values, and your way of life. So here's the classic lineup. You've got what you might call the big three: liberalism, conservatism, and socialism. And they're all fundamentally arguing about the economy and the role of the state. Then you get the more radical ideas like anarchism, which wants to get rid of the state completely, and fascism, which wants the state to control absolutely everything. And this shows the new battlegrounds. The focus totally shifts from class and state to identity and culture. Feminism takes on gender inequality. Green ideology looks at our relationship with the planet. Multiculturalism deals with cultural recognition. The entire political debate just fundamentally changed from being about wealth to being about our way of life. Okay, so we've got all these different belief systems, old and new. How in the world do we make sense of them all? How do we see how they relate to each other? Well, this is where political maps come in, and you're probably pretty familiar with the most common one. Yeah, we all know the simple left-to-right spectrum. Generally speaking, the left wants more change and equality, and the right values tradition and authority. It's a useful shorthand for sure, but as we're about to see, it's also pretty flawed. So this is where the horseshoe theory comes into play. It suggests that as you get to the absolute extremes of that left-right line, the ends actually start to curve toward each other, like a horseshoe. Why? Well, because ideologies at the very far ends, think communism and fascism, often end up sharing a really important feature: a total rejection of democracy and a love of authoritarian rule. But you know what?
even that horseshoe model isn't perfect. To really, truly understand the ideological landscape, we've got to move from a simple line to a two-dimensional grid. We need to add a whole second axis to the map.
And here it is, the political compass. So we keep that economic left-right axis for the horizontal line, but now we add a vertical one. At the top, you have authoritarianism, which means more state control, and at the bottom, you have libertarianism, which means more individual freedom. And now things get really interesting. Look at this. Stalinism and fascism, which we think of as polar opposites, are both way up top in the authoritarian quadrant. And down at the bottom, you have social democracy, which values freedom and economic equality, sitting diagonally from anarcho-capitalism, which values freedom and pure free markets. This two-dimensional map just reveals connections and differences that a simple line could never, ever show you.
So there you have it. From its definition to its internal blueprint and the maps we use to understand it, that's really the essence of political ideology. The most important thing to remember is that these aren't just random labels, they're powerful, structured systems of belief that literally shape our world. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Now that you know the blueprint, now that you can see the underlying structure, how does it change the way you see the political arguments you hear every